event, and also for having our expert AG here, also Verto from Metaportal. For those of you who have been part of the kickoff call 2 days ago, or for those who have watched the recording already, you might already have gotten to know him. Otherwise, you will shortly, and you will be amazed at his knowledge, from his knowledge, and also the value that he brings to our communities. Before I will go through the agenda of today's call, please be reminded to keep your mics muted while our panel is presenting. And you will have the opportunity to talk at the end of the call. The call will last around 1 hour, and we will start with a short intro from our side. What is Prime Rating? And I will also give you a short intro about the ongoing Metaverse Rate-athon. After, I will hand over to AG from Metaportal for an intro about their protocol, and he will walk you through the fundamental report template, which was created by Metaportal specifically for this Metaverse ratings. We will then wrap up with a session with questions and answers, and everyone will have the possibility to clarify anything that has not been clear, or if you have any questions related to the Rate-athon, and also if you have any questions on how to become a rater. I guess most of you already know what Prime Rating does, but for those who are new here, I'm happy to do a very quick intro. Prime DAO is actually a collective of DeFi builders, and Prime Rating is one of the subgroups of the DAO, which is coordinating basically a rate-to-earn approach that evaluates the quality of crypto projects. We are a permissionless rating platform, meaning that everyone can participate in the rating process to evaluate the risk associated with different protocols. So far, we have focused only on DeFi protocols, and we have rated more than 90 protocols already, and we continue to add new ones every week. Reports can basically be submitted at any time, but during this competitions called seasons or rate-athons, we do sprints and also give extra incentives to our raters. In this rate-athon, for example, the 3 best reports in terms of quality will receive up to 1,000 USDC plus 2,000 Prime tokens plus 20 game tokens and also 30 RXP tokens. The winner will be chosen based on the quality by our governors. With this Metaverse contest organized in collaboration with Metaportal, we want to expand our focus from DeFi also into the Metaverse by covering gaming projects, NFT marketplaces, guilds, media, and other tokens that can be attributed to the Metaverse. Metaportal has helped us create a specific template to evaluate this type of projects, given their deep experience in this field. And Metaportal also already has rated 5 reports for different Metaverse projects, such as Livium, Rarible, Wilder World, Ultra, and Merge Cycle. And they already have passed our Prime Rating governance approval process. And yeah, here also another thank you to the Metaportal team here today for delivering these high quality reports, which will help other raters to take them as a reference and also set a high quality standard. Metaportal will also assist Prime Rating in the review process of the reports that are going to be submitted by all the participants of the Rate-athon. So if you plan to write a report, or you might get actually direct feedback from one of their team members or of the members who are here today. I will now hand over to AG from Metaportal, which is going to give you a mini intro about Metaportal and then do a walkthrough of one of his Metaverse fundamental reports he already submitted. I hope this is going to help the raters to understand the new game-specific sections of the reports and also how to evaluate them. So I hand over to you, Verto. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you. So I'll do a very quick intro background on Metaportal, and then we'll just run through the report. On the report, on like the template itself, worth mentioning that we've developed it probably 3 months ago now, and the space moves really fast. So if you have um, any things that you think we should change, we should improve, any suggestions, ideas, just kind of send them our way. I'm happy to drop sort of contact details in the chat or just come into the Discord and have a chat with us. I think with how quickly the space moves, we sort of tend to revise things quite frequently when it comes to like just general our understanding of the metaverse in the space. And I think that that will be reflected in their framework as well. So yeah, with Metaportal, me and my co-founder kind of initially came into crypto through the DeFi space and were contributing full time at the Index Cooperative, which creates index products and structured products that are crypto native. That's where we launched the Metaverse Index about a year ago now, and so once we launched it, we started Metaportal, which was basically like a Substack where we just published research about metaverse in general, some macro pieces, some project-specific research, and like some like portfolio updates for MBI, for the Metaverse Index, and so on. And then once we ran the Metaverse Index for a while also being part of the Index Cooperative, we realized that doing both of those things is a bit too much. Metaverse space is starting to expand rapidly, and there's a lot of innovation in DeFi as well. So we just couldn't keep up with both of those areas, and so we wanted to focus on the metaverse. And we've sort of split out of the Index Corp, and we started creating a little bit more sort of meat around the Meta Portal brand, and we wanted to make it into something that is a brand on its own. And so yeah, and so we've been doing a few different things here and there. We launched the Metaportal Gaming Index about a month ago now as well. Um, so yeah, that's kind of a quick background. I'm happy to sort of answer questions in later on if we have time, but for now, I think it's worth just going through the report. I'll uh, I'll share my screen. Um, can everyone see that okay? Should I zoom in?
Maybe zoom in a bit, AG.
Is it better?
Yep, that looks good.
All right. So this is sort of not like an official format. I think there is an official format for these things, but it's kind of I think it's easier to do a walkthrough using this format. Uh, on on the kickoff call on Wednesday, we covered categories. Basically, we at Metaportal have developed like a list of metaverse categories that span sort of the application layer of the metaverse and not the infrastructure layer, but the application layer. And they're a little bit more, I don't want to say, I don't want to say they're a bit more thought through than the CoinGecko categories that we were using before. Um, but I think they're more representative of how we view the application layer of the space. So there should be a link, I think, on Gitbook to the categories. But again, if you have any questions, um, let me know. So this is a report for Merit Circle, which is a guild. And if you have questions as I walk through, can you just drop maybe a +1 in the chat or raise a hand so then I can address questions as I go through, as opposed to everything piling up and having to rush through in the end. Um, So the first section has three questions, and really trying to talk about the value proposition of a protocol or a product. Um, First question is kind of novelty of the solution, and it's really about how unique what the project is doing is. You know, it can be on the technical side, it can be on the organizational side, and yeah, we're really trying to assess if a protocol is doing something new here, or if they're just sort of building off of someone else's model and really just doing a few tweaks here and there, but nothing sort of groundbreaking, right? So as Merit Circle and to a large extent with most guilds, um, they are building on the guild model that was created and pioneered by YGG, right, by Yield Guild Games. And Merit Circle in that sense is very similar. If you look through kind of their Git book and how they talk about their project, a lot of language and terminology that they use is actually same as what YGG uses. And you know, it's things like sub-DAOs and the Merit Circle token being kind of the index of play to earn games. So it's pretty obvious that when they started off, it was basically okay, like YGG did this, so we're gonna do this, right? Um, and also like with the sub-DAOs, for example, YGG has taken and like they've developed the sub-DAO model, right? And they're really running with it. So they've launched a couple of sub-DAOs for specific games. They also launched regional sub-DAOs. They did their own capital raising, right? The India sub-DAO has a partnership with FTX, not FTX, the whole business, but their gaming division. And Merit Circle really hasn't done much on even on the sub-DAO vertical to push that forward. They do have decentralized governance, for example, and YGG doesn't, but their governance model is pretty standard governance model that we've seen across DeFi and elsewhere in the space. It just uses snapshots. Snapshot, it uses Open Zeppelin's governor contract that were developed together with Compound, and again, extensively used, right? So there's not much innovation, there's not much novelty there. Their their approach to like treasury management and managing the funds and investment side of things is different, but it's challenging to sort of ascribe novelty points to that. And again, they've recently put out like a vision post, right? And it has slightly different um, it has four verticals, and two of them are fairly new for Guild, which one of them is like the in-game marketplace, sorry, the marketplace for gaming assets, like generalized marketplace like OpenSea, but for gaming assets that they want to build out. And another one is Merge Circle Studios, which is basically like a partially like an incubator accelerator for games where they don't want to just fund games, they actually want to help develop them, right? So that's fairly novel, and we haven't seen many other guilds do that. Um, but that's like the vision, right? We don't know if they're going to execute on this. We don't know, um, yeah, like where they're going to take it. So to that extent, it's kind of like, yeah, maybe some minor technical organizational innovations, but nothing groundbreaking there. With a target market size, that one is challenging, right? Because we can think about like metaverse, right, as a concept. This digital economy is as a huge market, right? So it kind of like, well, shouldn't be like top score automatically. Or if we think about gaming, gaming is a massive industry. Um, so this one is like most of these projects are going to be trying to address a significant market opportunity, right? So I think, at least in our experience in the space, most of the projects will score rather highly on this, just because, right, like we trying to address the biggest opportunities of the Web 2 sort of and expand them. So yeah, like here's just some stats. We use some statistics on the gaming market because Mirror Circle is investing in the gaming ecosystem, and their success is sort of tied to it. Another part of Merit Circle, right, like is the investing side of things. So they're basically like a VC that invests in early stage games through both tokens and NFT. So if you wanted to take this further, you could look at the size of like Web3 or crypto gaming VC market, right? And you could try to assess how big that market is. But fundamentally, that's not really market size per se. So again, it's kind of like we talk about how as an investor, they can get exposure to a lot of different games, a lot of different genres, as opposed to focusing on like a specific niche, right? Which would be the case for like an individual game. And then also with like potential launch of this general marketplace for gaming items, again, they can benefit from the crypto gaming space as a whole, including the games that they haven't invested in. So I'll pause here. I saw there was a +1.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly ask, what would you need to see to give a 15 or a full score here to Merit Circle?
That's a good question, right? I think it would have to be something that is bigger than gaming, right? I think gaming itself is, is maybe 270 billion by mid 2020s, which is big. But like if you think about like Amazon, right? And if let's say everything is an NFT, and everything is traded on OpenSea, and that's a bigger market. I think at the end of the day, right, like all of these things are somewhat relative. So yeah, there isn't like a formula, right, for this. It's sort of relative to other markets, other opportunities within the metaverse. Okay, cool. So the next one is product market fit, and it's interesting, right? Because like, what is the product of a guild? So I think if you're rating something like this, you first sort of need to figure out what the product is, and how do you even think about product market fit for a guild. And so we can look at like, okay, like how many scholars do they have, or like how much income is coming in from scholarships. But I would argue that scholarship income, like scholarship numbers and how many scholars someone has, doesn't really indicate PMF. Like there's a lot of people who play these games as scholars, right? And the scaling of scholarships is actually limited by the tech that's available in the space. Also, Merit Circle recently said they are not really targeting scholarship growth as much as they're targeting like building engaging experience for, scholars who they now call gamers. So they've changed a little bit like their attitude there. So for me, when I was looking at this, I'm like, okay, how can I assess product market fit? So one thing that I thought about is their liquidity bootstrapping pool. It was perhaps the biggest LBP on Balancer, or certainly one of the biggest. There was a lot of interest in the token. They raised over 100 million USDC from it. So to me, that was like, okay, like there seems to be quite a bit of interest there. They also created the in-house NFT collection, and then they're building a backstory for it, and there's idea to sort of expand it from there. And so I was like, okay, like we can sort of look at the volume and the take up of that collection to see how market feels about Merit Circle and their potential, right? Because if the NFT unlocks certain perks or certain things within Merit Circle, and people want that NFT, then it sort of indicates that they think Merit Circle found product market fit. And I think the biggest one for Merit Circle and for sort of perhaps most guilds. So if you think about guilds, right? You can maybe perhaps you can say that, okay, like it's a guild, so majority of their income or the way they monetize is through scholarships, but that's actually not true. That's not how guilds monetize. So they monetize through VC investments, right? They have that's how they make money. And the scholarships, like the players, is what allows them to get into the rounds. Because again, scholarship income is unpredictable. No one's really developed a proper in-game economy yet that doesn't tank within like 6 months or 3 months even. So they use player liquidity as something that allows them to get into rounds, and that's why they have to like come up with these other things, right? Like marketplaces and so on, because if they don't, then they're just another gaming VC. And so I kind of looked at, okay, like are they getting into the rounds, right? Like are they getting into big projects, popular projects, high profile projects, and it seems to me like they do, right? So they get those opportunities. Um, but again, it's challenging, right? It's challenging to address uh, product market fit, to assess product market fit for something like this. Um, so in this case, right, we need to see more. We need to see the NFT develop. We need to see the marketplace. We need to see the studio's business and how that develops and what the take up is on that stuff. At the moment, really, the those few data points that we have to go by are fairly limited in our ability to sort of assess product market fit here. So the the second section really is the competitive mode, right? It's like what are some of the factors that can create a competitive mode around a project, around a protocol, and perhaps it could be through integrations, whether kind of vertical or horizontal. It can be through partnerships. It can be through intellectual property. But that's something that we trying to assess, like is there a competitive mode around this, or is it likely to just get copy pasted as soon as it gets a little bit successful, right? And so the first question is really around like integrations and partnerships with games, right? It's a bit challenging, or Merit Circle as well. It's rather challenging. You can say their investments are partnerships, but they're really investments, right? And if you think about any sort of VC, there's not much partnership work or integration work that they do. And so there's some potential that we see for future integrations, maybe from the marketplace or from their NFTs, but at the moment there's really not much there. And for MC token, for the Merit Circle token itself, again, it's not integrated anywhere in DeFi. So they score kind of really low on this. This description, right, is a bit challenging because it's not like it's a walled garden. It's just there's not much for them to integrate with. That's not their business model. That's not um, how the project functions. It's sort of same for intellectual property, right? And so there were a couple of questions in Discord in the Discord around intellectual property and how do you assess that? So I think the way we think about it is purely from the competitive mode perspective, right? Like um, we don't really like it's not about are they able to protect their IP through trademarks or licenses or any sort of legal structure. It's more around how strong is their IP and how much of a competitive moat does it give a project. And so some of the examples that I've used in the Discord, right, is for example, Axie has developed a pretty strong brand, pretty strong IP in the space, right? So they've like developed it in-house, right? Now um, they have options for what they want to do with that IP, right? They can do merchandise or they can put access into a movie and so on. Like other projects like Sandbox, for example, right? They chose to partner with a lot of kind of traditional entertainment brands, Smurfs, Walking Dead, what have you, right? To bring that IP to the sandbox, and so we think that for a virtual world, and there's a lot of not a lot, but there's a fair amount of virtual worlds out there. Um, this IP that Sandbox secured through their partnerships is something that creates a bit of a competitive moat for them, right? Um, Sorry, I'm just gonna have a look. I saw a question there, but I did catch it. 3D visual design of NFTs. Um, I think anything can really count as as IP. The question is like, does it give them any competitive mode, right? Like, and I don't really think it doesn't unless it's a really strong uh, brand or really strong like NFT collection, right? So um, whenever we answer this question, whenever we think about this question, it's really about like again competitive mode. Like, does this IP, does this brand that they've created, that the project has created, is it strong, right? Like, are people going to come to this project specifically because of the brand, specifically because of these assets or these stories that they've created? And so again, you can do that through development of internal IP, of internal story, or you can sort of partner, right? You can bring in external IP to your project, to your world. Um, so yeah, like with Merit Circle, obviously, like they're not really in the business of developing IP. They done it to some extent with their NFT launch and like there is potential for IP there with the story that they're developing and so on. Um, but there really isn't much there at the moment. There's also like we can see potential for they've brought in like an external agency to build like a tech stack for their scholarship management. And so if that's done well and they choose to like white label it, they could technically. But again, at this time, there really isn't much there on the intellectual property perspective. So the next two questions are kind of on the infrastructure, and the way we were thinking about it was sort of from two perspectives. One was like the marketplace business as well as the gaming business, right? So in crypto, when you're choosing obviously like your underlying L1 or underlying blockchain infrastructure, you have to make trade-offs, right? And so a lot of games, for example, are trading off security of Ethereum for scalability and cheap transactions somewhere else, right? And so that's why we see a lot of games go to Binance Smart Chain or Solana or some of these other um, L1s and rollups. So security is really just that. It's how secure is the infrastructure infrastructure stack is. So like Merit Circle obviously building everything on Ethereum. Their staking contracts on Ethereum. Their token deployment is on Ethereum. Um, so Ethereum, the way we see it, is the most secure infrastructure solution. And then if you sort of read through this table in the framework, right, it'll kind of explain to you how we think about security and what we think is more or less um, secure. And so the next question is really like the the other side of the security coin, right? So you can have Ethereum, right, which is really secure, but fees are really high. So for a business like Marketplace, it will slow adoption to some extent. Same to with the game that requires a lot of on-chain transactions. You can't really build a game on Ethereum. Maybe you can run a marketplace on Ethereum, but then you have to have the game off-chain. So yeah, it's really pretty straightforward. I think one thing that we go back and forth on a little bit is like, okay, for example, for Merit Circle, um, obviously they're on Ethereum, so transaction fees are high. But what happens when that doesn't really slow down adoption? Like if it doesn't impact adoption, because there isn't much you can do with Merit Circle, right? Like you can buy the token, you can stake the token, pretty much it. You can buy the NFTs. So the case can be made that, yeah, okay, like their infrastructure solution does have high transaction fees, but it doesn't really affect the protocol. So I think here um, we tend to be more conservative and say, okay, like maybe in the future when they build the generalized marketplace for gaming items, and if it's on Ethereum, it's still going to be a problem. So again, I think kind of the security and transaction fees are opposite side of the same coin, right? And so we also talk about here about ancillary infrastructure, and this is basically like wallets and bridges and so on. So if you deploy in somewhere else that is not Ethereum, like how many wallets support that chain, what's the UI on those wallets, like the bridges, is it easy to get your assets in there? Are there direct sort of bridges from a centralized exchange, for example, and so on. So that's the ancillary piece of it. And the next one, and this is, like, in our opinion, is pretty big, which is treasury management, right? A lot of projects have raised a lot of money and really not managing that money particularly well. And in sort of in our view, that's a big competitive advantage for projects that can do it well. And yeah, so this in a type of market that we are now, and potentially if we continue to be in the same sort of market environment for the next 6 to 12 months, like poor treasury management practices might start to break some protocols out there. And yeah, Merit Circle literally has the best treasury management practices that I've seen in the space, which probably has to do with the fact that two of the co-founders are VCs, right? So um, they've raised 100 million USDC through the liquidity bootstrapping event. They they deploy that pretty actively across the ecosystem, right? So they use Alchemix, Curve, Maple, Anchor, and there are like thoughtful proposals on each of those deployments with pros and cons, since there's debate, and so it's really thought out, and it does go through governance. They also LP their own token. We've seen them actively um, manage governance tokens. So with XS, they were farming Ron with it for a while. With FNC, which is the Fancy Games token, they're also, I think they do single-sided staking there. So yeah, like it's really thought out, and they also have because they're a VC, right? They have a policy to basically take gains relatively early on to recoup some of their investment. And they also have policies on, once they've taken those gains, where do those go, right? And some of them go to USDC, some of them go into ETH, wrapped Bitcoin, some of them go into buybacks and so on. So, and it's all like, it has all gone through the governance process. So yeah, that's they get the highest score possible for that. It's literally the best treasury management I've seen. There's a question there. Should we care about treasury management if the protocol is fully centralized? Yeah, I think so. I mean, if protocol runs out of money, right? It doesn't really matter if it's centralized or decentralized. Or again, it's how effective are you at utilizing what's in your treasury. So I think centralized, decentralized doesn't particularly matter for treasury management, the way I see it. Okay, I got 20 minutes left. I'll try to run through some of this stuff rather quickly. So token economics is like the third section. First part is like the Genesis token distribution, which is basically, yeah, how fair, excuse me, is the Genesis token distribution? How well does it align different stakeholders? Like if the team and investors get 70%, obviously that's not great. You can look at the top addresses and how many addresses are like the distribution of addresses and things like that. So in general, I think we I think the team usually gets like 10-15%, investors roughly the same. So if team and investors are like 30%, 40%, that's okay. And you want ideally the rest allocated to treasury or some incentive structures or community incentives and things like that. So for Merit Circle, it's pretty fair. Team and advisors are 20% and investors are 14%. They have 45% going to the DAO treasury. I think there is a liquidity mining program as well. There's a community incentives wallet. So it's the distribution is pretty good. So they score 12 here. They'd get a better score, for example, if the team took less again and investors took less in the case of like a fair launch and or something like that. Next one is like, yeah, the purpose of the token in the ecosystem, in the protocol. Like, is it just governance, or is it governance utility, or is it utility and maybe value capture or like revenue share? And the scoring is relatively straightforward here, right? So the top bracket is really if a token provides effective utility to the holder, right? They can actually do something with it. It gives you some share of revenue, so there is some value capture that happens, and you get governance, right? And so and then it's just really a ladder down from there. So yeah, for Merit Circle, there is definitely governance. For now, there is no utility. There is some value capture, and there is opportunity for much more value capture and revenue share there. So that's why they They are in the sort of the second bracket from the top on that. So next one is ongoing token issuance, inflation, and it's basically like every token has inflation, right? So they all start with a relatively small circulating float, and then there's a lot of inflation. And so this question is really meant to evaluate the purpose of that inflation. Like, do you need that inflation? Does it need to happen? If it does happen, where does it go? Like, does it go to parties, to the stakeholders that it should go to for the success of the protocol? Does it go to parties that then effectively aligns those parties for the benefit of the protocol? Does it, does the inflation help coordination of different stakeholders? So things like that. With merit circle specifically, there are three sources of inflation for the token. One is the liquidity mining incentives, and the single-sided staking incentive. But so first off, there is, if you want to earn that, you have to lock up your tokens between 0 and 12 months. And then once you claim the rewards, there is a 12 months cliff. So like there is inflation from that, but it's going to be a while until we actually see it. And we can argue that that sort of lockup mechanism with the cliff actually effectively aligns those people, right, with the ecosystem. Like, they're in it for the long term, they're locking up their MC, they're committing their capital for 12 months plus. So they should probably get some inflation. So that, and liquidity mining incentives in general is a very well established and sort of accepted practice in the industry. So it's okay. And the next two sources of inflation are the community incentives wallet and the DAO treasury. Disbursement of funds from both of those wallets is subject to governance. So we don't think that like the governance is going to vote on something that is like stupid, right? That just like that creates an inflation without benefit for the protocol. Plus, they have some burn mechanisms for the tokens in the community incentives wallet. So it's pretty strong overall on the ongoing inflation side. And actually, now that I've talked through it, maybe it deserves a 9, not an 8. But that's the inflation point. Value capture is there are two. There's sort of two parts there, right? One is like how effective the value capture mechanism is, if it exists at all. And second is, once the value is captured, where does it go, right? Like, does it go to, does it go out in a way that coordinates different stakeholders for the benefit of the protocol? Right, so it's kind of here, like the ability to accrue value and consequently distribute it to stakeholders can be an effective coordination mechanism, right? So with Merit Circle, there is some value capture there, and there are sort of guidelines and future vision for more value capture from the gaming side. There is also some value capture through buyback and burn mechanisms there. So in general, value capture is pretty good, but again, for now, they haven't built out some of those other verticals that they're talking about, like the gaming marketplace or the studios business, right? That supposedly will capture value for the MC token. So while the existing kind of structure is probably the best of like what they can do is what they have now, it still sort of leaves quite a bit to be desired there. The token liquidity is pretty straightforward. Basically, how easy is it to get a token, to get access to the token to be able to buy or sell the token on both decentralized and centralized exchanges. And the next one is just extrinsic productivity, which is basically like, can I do something with this token outside of this project, right? So can I put it into Aave? Can I put it in the Fuse pool? Can I borrow against it? What can I do with it? Does it give me access to some whitelists or something like that? And there's nothing for MC token, for example, so they get a 0 there. Fourth section is the team. We're trying to assess how strong and reputable the team is. I know that in the DeFi reports, I think there was like the pseudonymous teams were not viewed particularly favorably, and were sort of given a discount. I like that's how I think it was in DeFi reports. I'm not sure, but for us, like, we don't necessarily care if the team is pseudonymous, but if they are, we want them to have really strong track record and reputation in the space, right? We want them to have done something else, to have basically enough reputation where if they do something malicious, it's going to be really damaging to them, right? And yeah, and like the buckets are really just between public, highly credible, maybe public, but are not really OGs, haven't been in space for too long. And then, you go down to somewhat shady teams in the space. So relevant experience, yeah, it's basically, do they have relevant experience for what they're building? Have they executed before? And so on. So like for Merit Circle, for example, like on the operational side of actually building tech products, like for example, the management platform for the scholars, right? They're trying to build that with an external agency, the gaming marketplace, things like that. Like, they don't have operational experience to build that in the sort of in the background of the founders. There's none of that. So they've brought in someone to work on the management platform, but again, it's just one person. They do have relevant background, but it's not like a high profile hire. So on the operational side, it's rather challenging from our perspective. But on the other side, they're VC, and two of the co-founders have their own VC fund where they've made some significant investments into like high profile projects. And for the investment vertical of their business, as well as for studios, which is like an accelerator, that financial VC background is pretty good. So they got a 10 on this. I think it would be great if they had more operational expertise. So if they hired one or two people with operational background of building out tech products. But yeah, so that's that. Thought leadership and public presence. Yeah, basically, like, are they out there, right? Are they going to panels? Are they giving talks? Are they going on podcasts? Do they talk about the industry and the space as a whole? Do they talk about their project? Things like that, right? So again, if they're always out there and they're viewed as credible and they have a reputation in the space, that's a benefit. They can bring more attention to the project. Let's see. So, all right, we're really running out of time. So this one is ability to foster community and coordinate resources, right? It's just like, are you able to attract the community, and are you able to then coordinate resources, both human and financial, for the benefit of that protocol, right? And so if you go through like discords and governance forums and messages, you'll get a sense of like how good the team is at doing that stuff. And yeah, governance is fairly straightforward. Right? It's like, what can you do with the token? Like, what's the extent of your ability to govern? Like, how many parameters can you actually change through governance? This one is like how many governance contributors there are. If the governance like is decentralized and you can actually do something with it, like how active it is, how many people are participating. Infrastructure, right, is basically like what does the protocol use? Like if it's Discord voting, perhaps it's not too robust. But if it has proper process and goes to snapshot and it uses Tally or some of these other voting tools, then that's quite a bit better. And the last one is like process and sort of ease of use. Is there a process? How easy it is to use? Pretty straightforward. So the sixth section is gaming specific. There are not that many games out there that are live where you can actually evaluate some of these things. So if the game is not live, don't fill it out. Just leave it blank. And obviously, if you're not like if you're rating a protocol that is not a game, don't worry about this one. So the first question here is like ease of use and onboarding, right? Like from the user experience perspective, how easy it is for me to play this game. Do I need to download MetaMask? Do I need to try to get my dollars through a bank into MetaMask, buy ETH, whatever? Like how easy it is. And then once I'm in the game, let's say I got there, right? Like how easy it is for me to understand it. Are there videos? Are there materials? Are there walkthroughs? Things like that, right? So perhaps right there, perhaps there are direct fiat on ramps into the game, things like that. This one is really tough, right? So sustainability of play to earn or in-game economies, and most games right now are not really sustainable. And this is really kind of the brackets here are really around how many economic levers exist within the game to adjust the in-game economy, right? Like for Axie, there is only one lever that the team can pull, which is like breeding costs. And so that's like um, one aspect of it. And ideally, you want economies that are fairly complex, not complicated, but complex, that have multiple sinks, they have different faucets, there is crafting, you can combine multiple items into next level item, you can sort of break through them, like you could break items into the underlying components, you can recreate, like you want economies, in-game economies that are more comparable to what we have in traditional games today, right? We've been building game economies for like 30, 40 years now. So that's like one section. The second section is like how decentralized is that decision-making process on the in-game economy side? Is it, just the team that are making all the decisions? Is the governance decentralized over that? And the last one is just utilization of NFTs. Like NFTs are a big part of what we think makes crypto games work and makes them interesting. And so, right, ideally, everything in the game is an NFT and can be traded. And these three categories, like three score categories, are really the range between everything is an NFT and can be traded to nothing is an NFT and can be traded. All right, I took a bit too long on this. So if there are any questions, let's go through those, and then I'm happy to stay on and talk through governance in the end for those who want to stay.
Cool. Thank you very much for this detailed explanations. Like, it's really cool to get insights on how you approach your reviews, and I'm sure that's it's going to be very useful information to our community and also participants of the Metaverse Rate-athon. Before we move to the Q&A session, I would just like to remind everyone that the Rate-athon for the Metaverse lasts till the 27th of April, so we still have another 12 days to go. So if you have any questions now to the Prime team or also to AG, now it's time to unmute your mic.
Yeah, so I have a question. This deadline, the 27th, is for the presentation of the report, or for what?
If someone from Prime team can answer, like, do the reports need to be submitted by 27th, or?
Yeah, sorry, I can take that, Carlos. Thanks, AG. The question wasn't super clear to me there. So, Carlos, you need to submit to Prime, the report before the 27th. We also accept reports that have been submitted for feedback by that time. Correct me here, Thomas, if you're there, if that's correct. So it doesn't have to be the final report with all the feedback incorporated from the reviewers, but even the first version, which is submitted for feedback, that would also count if it's submitted before that day.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
All right. I think if there are no questions, I can go through governance again, if that's helpful.
AG, it's maybe helpful just to give a sense to folks about what is the review process logistically. How are you thinking about it once someone submits a report on Prime? What is your process for going through it, and how would you get back for feedback or comments?
Sorry, I think we just review the report and leave the comments in the Google Doc. Obviously, like, I'm happy to have a conversation in the DMs if people want to send a message and talk about, like, the feedback that's provided. But I think it's also fine to have that, like, conversation in the comments on the Google Doc itself. Yeah, does that answer it?
Yeah, sure. That's great. And it's amazing to have you and Dark Forest, there and reading the reports and providing all this super valuable feedback.
Great. And, like, we are not, I think we both learn almost on a daily basis in the space of also so fast. So if you think we can improve something on the framework itself, or you have other ideas, just send them through.
Cool, will do.
I think it would be cool if we have, like, a very quick overview of the governance again, because one community member was asking, so maybe we can just, like, take another 5 minutes and go through that quickly to answer these final questions, and then we can wrap up.
Yeah. So the first question is the extent of governance capabilities, which is basically, like, if you own the token, right? Like, what type of governance can you do with it? Can you change everything about the protocol through governance, or is it only a subset of decisions, right? So can I change I don't know, like let's say Axie had decentralized governance, right? Like, can I change distribution of funds from the treasury? Can I like just put up a proposal that says send out million access to these wallets as an airdrop, or can I only change like some small thing on the in-game economy, right? Maybe it's like maybe I can put a proposal to adjust the breeding cost, but that's about it. So like to what extent can you affect the protocol through governance? And then also like um, in terms of the process and the structure, right? Like, are there any other limitations to your governance ability, right? Like some protocols have, you need to have like a minimum number of tokens to put something for a vote, right? So that's obviously a limitation. Yeah, there is also like some protocols use governance votes as signaling, right? So they're not the core team doesn't have to execute on the vote. It's just used as a signal, and the team can choose whether or not they want to move forward and execute on this, right? So that's kind of your extent of governance capabilities, and you could kind of like if you read through this section, right, it sort of covers it in terms of like what questions you should be asking. um, the next one is, yeah, basically like how many people participate in this, right? Like how many active voters? Is there delegation, right? So like maybe the people who don't want to participate in governance because it takes a lot of time, can they delegate their votes, right? Like things like that. So for Merit Circle, for example, like most of their proposals are discussed on the discourse forum, similar to a lot of other protocols, and there's generally a pretty good discussion, right? And it's quite thoughtful. There is a lot of kind of in-depth conversation on a lot of these proposals, and so they generally get like 20 to 30 comments, and they are very sort of thoughtful. And so the amount of comments itself is relatively low. Like there are protocols that have much more comments, but the quality of engagement is really good. And then if you look at snapshot voting, right? For example, their most voted on proposal had 200 addresses voting, and their average proposal is like 100 to 120 addresses. And so if you look on Etherscan, like you see that there's close to 7,000 token holders, and if only 100, 120 of them are voting, that's actually a very tiny amount. So while like the process itself is open and anyone can vote, there is really not that many people who do. So it's kind of like it's captured a little bit, and not that captured is always bad, but in this particular case, there is kind of very few individuals and VCs and the core team that are governing this, but the debate is public. It's quite active. It's thoughtful, and in general, we haven't seen any negative consequences from stemming from the fact that there are not that many people that are participating. Yeah, so this one is like robustness of the infrastructure, right? Like, does the protocol have a reliable voting mechanism, right? Or like if you're voting in Discord through emojis, not particularly reliable, can be botted to death. The Yeah, like, is the process itself robust, right? Uh, like does the process, the governance process, actually make sense, or is it like absolutely random? I throw something up on the discourse and then I can say put it on snapshot and so on. Again, are the votes binding, right? Like if they're not binding, then the process itself is perhaps not that robust, right? Like and then, for example, You can look at quorums as well as something that indicates robustness. So for example, for Mirrored Circle, the quorum is currently set at 2 million tokens, which is a legacy decision, and it's like less than 2% of circulating supply, which is really low. Most projects have at least 5% and higher for consequential decisions. And also, again, in terms of robustness, like who can put up the proposal on Snapshot, right? Even though anyone can make a proposal, only a few people have admin permissions on Snapshot to actually put something up for voting. And then if a proposal passes, usually someone needs to execute it, right? So it's either a multisig or a core team or the investment team, depending on type of proposal. So again, like there are some vulnerabilities, but kind of like I say, it is robust, it has proven reliable, and while vulnerabilities exist, there is no evidence that any of them have been exploited or lead to issues. So that's the robustness. The ease of use is basically, is there a formal governance process? Like, is there documentation on the process? Can people understand how to participate in governance? Are there dedicated channels, right? Either like the forum or a specific section in the Discord where governance proposals are discussed. So it's basically just yeah, like how easy is it to participate? And that's it for governance.
Thank you very much, AG, for all your insight and also taking the time to walk us through the governance section again. So if everyone has like last questions to address, it's now, and otherwise, if there's no questions anymore, also feel free to drop a message in our Discord if you get stuck anyway.
Awesome. Looks like I've talked for quite a long time. People don't have questions anymore.
Yeah, I think that's it. So thank you very much for your time, and it was great. And thanks for everyone joining. Have a great evening or a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.